Introducing me now, he is Irish journalist and writer, terrific guy. Welcome back to the programme, John Waters. And you were right, that's a great tune, that, John.
Oh, Richie, yeah, it's fantastic. It really gets you, you know. It's powerful, it's so simple and so, it's the streets of Laredo. Did you notice that? Did you pick that up? The last time I was talking to you, I said I didn't know, and I got loads of people telling me it's the streets of Laredo.
I didn't. No, I'd love to say, yeah, I did, but I'd be lying. I didn't, John, no.
The melody, yeah. Johnny Cash used to sing it, but it's an all Irish tune, you know. I suppose it's made its way across over to America and turned into a country song, you know.
Yeah, it's brilliant, mate. Yeah, thanks for putting me on to it. What were you thinking when Micheál Martin, the Irish Taoiseach, was facing down the camera the other evening saying that, I'm sorry, I hate to do this, I know this is hurting everybody, but this has got to go on until April. Do I need to ask what you were thinking?
Yeah, I don't watch it, but I did actually watch about 20 seconds of them, you know, and I just had enough to take in the whole the look of them, you know, because I'm fascinated by these guys now, you know, how they can actually be turning into Joe Stalin, and you know, they must be looking in the mirror and thinking, my name is Joe Stalin now, you know, and all that, you know, my name is Goebbels, you know, like, and yet they don't seem to have any sense of, like, there's an air of detachment about them, like they're obviously in some bubble, Richie, where they're not accessible to normal human emotions, let's say. Or there are other factors. I don't know what they might be. Maybe they're getting a big bung of money every week from somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, I watched them, and you see, it struck me about all of that thing, that they've set all this thing up essentially to wipe out 2021. This is the purpose of it. It's already, you can see it. They've managed to, because, you know, they start telling you, well, you know, after the Christmas will be grand. They say, oh, in the middle of the Christmas, then they tell you, well, no, you know, we're going to have to bring the lockdown back again, you know, and then it's not going to be in January, I'm afraid it's going to be February, you know, and, oh, God, it's looking like Valentine's Day. Oh, well, God, it could be St. Patrick's Day now, you know, and maybe Easter. And then now, well, we're looking at the 1st of May, you know, and maybe the 21st, all this stuff, right? And they keep moving it forward, because, you see, essentially, like in all the things, did you ever get a job done in your house, Richie? You know, like I got a job of plastering done there recently, and the plasterer told me, oh, it'll take me 2 weeks, you know, and I said, oh, okay. And then, like, 2 weeks comes and goes, and 3 weeks comes and goes, and he said, oh, it could be now, the weather is bad, it could be a month, you know, and this goes on then, and eventually it's 6 months, Richie, you know, and, you know, but you see, the thing, there's a mechanism there where they get you, where you say, okay, I live like this for another while, and you go on, and then you go on, but there is a cracking point, and I think that they've detected that there is a cracking point, and they're just trying to stretch it out in a different way now. And the same with Boris, you know, they're essentially trying to wipe out 2021, because you see, every year now, and I told you the last time, I think, Richie, about that I looked up the World Bank website, and it talked about the COVID project, and it said the start date of the COVID project was March 2020, which we all kind of know, but the finish date we may not know. It's March 2025, right? Now, you see, if they're going to get there, they need to kind of, you know, play us along, because they have a huge problem. They have 4 huge problems, which is 4 years, and that they need, therefore, to wipe out the middle of those years. And this is how they're doing it, because they need to get September. Because once you get September, say, oh, well, now the winter's coming, flu season, we're going to have lockdown. But how are we going to get across the summer? So this is their tactic, and they're essentially wiping out the tourist industry in Ireland, Britain, everywhere for the year, because they're saying the hotels can't open. And this is the kind of stuff. Now, I puzzle with this, Richie. We've been struggling and wrestling with all this for the last 11 months, but I had an insight today into the whole thing, Richie, that really I never had before. And somebody was sending me a tweet somewhere. I don't do Twitter, but people send me tweets, and they're very interesting. Was one from NPHET. This is the organisation in Ireland that is the kind of equivalent of SAGE in the United Kingdom. They're the kind of the special health unit set up to deal with the COVID cult, you know. And what I was saying was that there's certain activities that are particularly prone to infectiousness, and they're basically in the home, and they are eating, drinking, exercising, shouting, and singing, right?
Yeah.
Now, they're the things, right? Now, actually, somebody else sent out a thing, and they did it. It was very interesting, because there was things like, you know, exercising. was a zero change in the level of infectiousness, apparently. And this is Neffet's own figures. But we leave that aside because that's kind of to be expected.
So eating and drinking.
I had this, sudden insight, Richie, that what the problem is this. And it never occurred to me before. When I was growing up in the west of Ireland, Richie, in a small town, 2,000 people, Castlereagh, right? There was kind of about 3 or 4 different people who were kind of really above the others. And they weren't actually at that time rich people as they might be now. They were actually because they had certain status, like the guard sergeant or the superintendent if we had one. There was the teachers, the school teacher. And the doctor, of course, was probably preeminent among them all. He was a man who was regarded as highly learned. And generally, he was actually highly learned. It was very unusual that you met a stupid doctor in those days, right? But the problem is, Richie, I think now the reason is they're pretty much nearly all stupid now. And we haven't copped onto it. Because anybody who would come out with stuff like this, like to say that eating and drinking is the cause of infectiousness, I might as well say, look, the problem with it, the cause of infectiousness is actually being alive.
Being alive, yeah. That's
yeah.
Right.
And the solution is therefore to kill everybody, and we've solved it now at last. Now, we're only one step away from that, Richie, actually, in that logic. And that's my theory now, finally, that doctors are stupid. That osmotically, as we say, by osmosis over the years, they stopped being smart. Or the class of people going into doctoring became less intelligent. And actually, when you think about it, there's a reason. I know there's a reason in the Irish system for that, which is that everything is about points. As for a long time, the highest points were from medicine, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And people with the most points went into medicine, whether they wanted to be doctors or not, whether they had any aptitude or talent or inclination. And so you end up with totally round pegs and square holes. Or the other way around, whatever it is, I forget. And therefore you end up with this sort of situation where we are now have a hunter in all our countries of doctors who are as thick as donkeys.
I wonder, did they make it easier? Have they made that? This is a very interesting train of thought now, line that you're going down. I'm wide open to this as a possibility. I wonder, have they made qualifying in medicine, once you're in university, has that been made a bit easier than maybe it once was? I don't know, but I'd have a fiver on it that maybe it has been.
Oh, I would say almost certainly. I don't know anything specific, but I do know that everything else has been dumbed down to hell.
Hasn't it? Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And I did meet sorry, John. I did meet a student here some years ago who was studying medicine, and he was asking me about why I had never. In fact, it was a guy who had qualified as a doctor, and he went and specialised in neurology, and he thought that I was intelligent. I'm not saying that I am or that I'm not, but he found me to be an intelligent enough guy. Did you go to uni? I said I did. I was stupid enough to go twice. And he was saying, did you ever consider medicine? And I said no, never considered it, and I never had the mathematics, never had the ability. And he said to me, his name was Kevin, and he's from the Far East. He said to me, a guy like you these days could easily cram it. You could probably do it in a couple of years. And that's what he said. Any guy like you with half a brain could do it. Could do it now. Wow. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You see, I noticed this now. You see, and it's amazing to see yourself when you're growing up in that kind of respect, that veneration for the doctor. I remember the doctor would come to the house, Richie, and there would be a silence would fall over everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And my mother and father would watch and wait for the doctor to speak. The oracle speak it, and we all there would wait, for he spoke nothing but pure wisdom. And we think it's that some part of ourselves is ineradicable in us, in me, I'm sure, that I cannot get this out of my head, that the doctor, and the white coat is kind of in general, once you go to the hospital, the white coat does it. Once the guy in the white coat comes, the coat can be dirty as well, it doesn't matter. You fall on your knees, metaphorically, and sometimes literally, if he wants to kind of look at the top of your head or something. But you kind of are totally in awe of these guys. And that's at the heart of all this scam. Because we still do that, literally and metaphorically, to the people who are actually destroying our lives now in the name of doctrine.
So here's a question for you then.
They're doctoring death certs, they're doctoring tests, they're doctoring everything. and we just fall on our knees in supplication before them.
Now, this is really interesting. John Waters is our guest. So I agree with every word of that. We still do. Regardless of whether you're 25 now or 18 or 19, we still do. We don't question. We assume their authority is basically, it exists because we give it to them by our belief in their authority and their knowledge. So we know that the vast majority of people have not been exposed to the many doctors who are equally qualified, but who dispute the COVID, let's call it what it is, the COVID bollocks. Now, we know that most people, sadly, don't hear shows like this, so they're not exposed to that. What do you think would happen to the supplicant, to the man or woman who, worships the doctor, if they did get to hear the other doctor with the same qualifications, even from a more prestigious university? Do you think it would make any difference at this stage?
Well, that's interesting. Yes, it would actually in normal circumstances, if there was a kind of a level playing field, as the fellow says, But the problem is that all comes mediated by the media, which is most of it profoundly corrupt. So that they tell you, they warn you in advance against the kind of the denier doctor, the doctor who isn't in on the program, who is, careless with lies or something like that, and that message is going out there very thick and heavy for the last few months as well. Because you're right. I mean, there are some exceptional doctors we've seen, like going right back to April, like Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg in German, Dr. Sutrat Bhakti, Dr. John Ioannidis. There's a list. I could list them for the next half hour. Brilliant guys who have done real research into this and actually said it's actually what you said it was, just there now. But the people, as you say, don't get to meet them. But if they met them in the white coats, it would be a very interesting moment.
Wouldn't
because then actually that would really tackle the cognitive dissonance, That would really cause it to kind of flare up. But it would actually have to come to some kind of decision then, and that would be most interesting.
Dolores Cahill, our own Dolores Cahill, of course,
yes.
UCD leading that charge. I think she's doing an amazing job. John Waters is our guest, folks. Great writer and great journalist and author. You should check out his books. I will put links out to where you can read John's books. And John and Gemma O'Doherty and some others have had the courage to try and take this on in the courts in Ireland. Laura Layton, pub landlady in Mobberley in Cheshire, who was on the programme yesterday, just tweeting to say, I could listen to John Waters talk all day. John's voice is hypnotic. Now, let me put this question to you. Thanks, Laura. Gerald Celente was on this programme yesterday. A Christian man. I love Gerald. Very eccentric guy, but very smart. I've known him for years. Successful businessman in America who produces something called the Trends Journal. And through that, for years, he's been predicting economic and political trends. And he really has been, really successful. He's a great bloke, is Gerald. And he's a Christian man. And as time has gone on, he's looking at this and he is seeing a satanic element to this. Now, look, I don't want to, if this is a waste of your time, and you think I'm going down silly avenues now, you tell me and we'll move on. I'm agnostic, me. I'm not definite in my train of thought when it comes to God or a creator. I'm open-minded. Gerald says, Richie, this is satanic. The people that are running this are satanic. What do you think?
Well, I think within any meaning of the word, you could you could list out a series of different kind of layers of meanings of the word satanic. Some of them literal or close to literal. And I would say absolutely yes. The way I see it is that if we believe in good, then we must believe in evil, because without black there is no white. It goes without saying. Evil does exist, and undoubtedly, evil. That concept of evil is the only one I think that fits what we have seen, because there are so many imponderables without it. We cannot look at what's happening. You see these guys lining up. You're talking about the Irish government and the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach and these guys lining up behind their microphones. And they're sniggering and smirking like teenagers, while they're giving out information that is destroying lives on a daily, weekly basis. Now, I don't know if you can say that any one of those is actually evil, but there's no doubt about it that their whole actions is possessed by an evil force, for sure, because they have cut off, they have from all empathy with human persons, with other human beings. They do not understand other human beings at any level now. It is quite clear to me. I wonder about that. I think about all kinds of things, Richie. I think, for example, like in Ireland, I wrote my book there a couple of years ago. It's "Give Us Back the Bad Roads," which is in some way a kind of a commentary about all these motorways that sprang up all over Ireland in the last, say, 20, 30 years, mainly in the last 20 years. Because I remember actually driving on the Naas dual carriageway when it was the first. It wasn't even a motorway; it was a dual carriageway. That was the first one in Ireland. It was an actual wonder,
Yeah.
But I actually think now, is it that these guys no longer, when they come to Dublin, they come on motorways and they have not to pass by the houses of ordinary people, and therefore are so remote. These things go into my head now, Richie. I know that's kind of a very superficial kind of understanding.
It's not.
But is it accumulation of things like this, Richie, that has caused them to become completely detached? We knew someone like go to the British situation. I saw that guy Hancock. What's his name? Max or I don't know.
Yeah, Matt Hancock, the health secretary. Yeah.
Like he was talking about people who don't tell the truth when they come back after holidays, and he was talking 10 years in jail. And I was looking at this guy, and honest to God, Richie, I was thinking to myself, okay, 10 years for a 19-year-old young fella who's just out for a laugh and a bit of, courting or whatever over in Portugal, right? And who doesn't want to get caught or doesn't want his parents to find out where he was. I don't know. It's his own business, right? But Matt wants to put him in jail for 10 years. And the question that came into my mind immediately, okay, well, in that case, when this is all over, how many years would Matt want to get for thinking up this?
Yeah.
Like, what would be enough for a man that would think up a thing like that? Like, he'd obviously have to be more than 10. Would it be 20? 20 would double wouldn't be enough, like, because, I mean, you're actually talking about a 19-year-old lad who's just kind of a bit of an Egypt, maybe.
Yeah.
And Matt wants to, destroy his life from 19 to 29. So, Matt, I would think you're looking at 50 years for Matt, for that alone. And there's lots more. So I don't see Matt getting out third term, if I am my way. But I'm talking about that there's this is how you start feeling, about these people. And I know this is like there's people sending me, honest to God, farmers like, sending me pictures of iron bars that they would like to use on these guys. I'm not joking, like, that this is what they're thinking now. Because what we've gone through, Richie, has exhausted democracy. Democracy is exhausted because we can't actually get at it with any words, with any conversation. There's no conversation. We're not permitted. The journalists, the high priests of journalism, of the media, the Lord ha-has and the Lady ha-has, they're monopolizing the whole thing, and they're simply shoving this stuff out and down our throats.
Has it not revealed, has it not exposed, John, that democracy never really existed? That there was an illusion of it. We believed it. I certainly believed it when I was working at WLR FM back in the late 90s and interviewing local and national politicians. I believed in it. Has this not just exposed that it really has never existed, that there was an illusion of it?
Yeah, I think that's right, Richie. You'd have to say that. Because there was no sudden moment of rupture that you'd say that anything happened. That clearly these guys started acting from the very beginning of this as if they had the right to do these things.
And that it was always there. Yeah. You've just disappeared. It's almost like you've left the room there. The mic is gone completely. Are you back?
Is that better, Richie?
That's lovely. That's lovely. No, it was grand. It was grand most of the time, just in the last moment. You kind of faded away. No, that was a good... You were getting into that. That's you were going into a good place there. This illusion of it. You said that they acted at the beginning of this last March as if there was always their remit to do it.
That they have the right. And this is the amazing thing, Richie, like in all of the things, like we've gone through the court process and we're back in next week again now for our appeal judgment. It's coming up on Tuesday. We don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say that I'm pessimistic, but like the amazing thing is about the way all the elements of the system so far have knitted together and gone in the same weave on this whole thing and treated it as if there was self-evidently a context and a pretext for what the government was doing and that it was entirely justified And every single element of the media has done that. We've talked before. The media have sat down, have lain down. They've given up. They've stopped being watchdogs and custodians of the Fourth Estate franchise. They've stopped looking after our democracy for us. They've stopped, all the journalists, the great journalists in the past that we remember who inspired you and me, I'm sure, to go into, I'm talking about Keith Waterhouse and people like Paul Foote even, people like that, idealistic left-wingers in many cases, like John Pilger, these guys that I read when I was a kid, like going to work in an office every day at lunchtime. What would they say? I hear John Pilger has come out actually over in Australia in the last couple of days about this, but where was he until now? Like what's happened to everybody? That we can't, that the word democracy means nothing. And I have to say, Richie, you're right. We've all been kind of, caught out. We actually did believe it and we did trust it. And now we know it's nothing. It's nothing. If it ever existed, we have to start building it from the very foundations up again because it was no use. It didn't withstand the first real challenge. And it wasn't even a challenge involving tanks and guns or bombs or anything like that. It was just a challenge in which the flu was weaponized to tyrannize entire populations. You might say the entirety of the population of the world. That's unbelievable. And I don't know where the inquiry into this is going to come from, Richie, but it has to happen. We have to find adults somewhere. If you know any adults, if there are any adults listening, please ring Richie and give your name in, because we'll be needing you real soon for an inquiry to investigate these and put all of these events and put all these gangsters on trial and put them to jail, not for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but for at least 50 apiece.
For life. Yeah, I would.
That's the measure of that, Richie. Honestly, this is the measure of it. We have to frame this correctly now because this has been the greatest crime of, I don't know how long. God almighty, how long has there since a crime in the public sphere of the world has occurred? Because this one wasn't just in the public sphere. It invaded the very houses, the very homes, the sacred homes of people, the inviolable homes of people, where you were told that you couldn't have X number of people in your house or X plus one person in your house. How dare they? How dare they? Who the hell are these guys? Who the hell do they think they are? We need to fight back. We need to take our countries back. We need to get these guys. We need to start building prisons real fast for these guys.
Yeah. I agree. Life in prison for every one of them, complicit in it. They know. Yeah. They know.
And the journalists too, Richie. And the journalists, the editors.
And the editors. I mean, I've tried to explain to my listeners, having worked in the media, how it works, how it goes. And it's horrifying for people to hear it. But I've explained to my audience over the years, even before this thing, how it works. How the BBC will send directives around to its staff, to its editors, that there's only one way on this issue. I mean, we covered 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the BBC, for example, sent a directive to all of its editorial staff that there was no longer any requirement to get any balance on climate change. If somebody is speaking about climate change, do not feel the need to find a professor who says that man-made climate change is being exaggerated. The issue has been settled. And I know, because I've got friends at the BBC, that at the outset of this scam, and I can't describe it as beautifully and use the language that you do, you're a fantastic speaker, as you are a writer, they've been told from the beginning that this is real, it's deadly, coronavirus, and we need to vaccinate the entire world to alleviate it and to make us all safe again. That's the be-all and the end-all of it. Don't go looking for balance. That's how it works. It's sickening. And as you said, and you're right, you will have program producers now, you will have floor managers, you will have studio managers, you will have directors, and you will have presenters who know in their heart of hearts that this is the greatest scam ever dreamed up by evil men and women. And yet they go on the air every day and serve up softball questions to idiots like Jonathan Van Tam, the NFET guys that you mentioned earlier on. Softball questions like, do you think that we need to vaccinate nearly the entire population? Oh, thanks, Anya. Yeah, we do. We need to get as many people as we can vaccinated. It's horrifying to me, John. I never claimed to be the greatest broadcaster of all time. I'm certainly nowhere near it. but I was a fantastic radio producer. I can't imagine how these bastards look themselves in the mirror when they go to bed of an evening and don't collapse under the guilt of what they're doing to people. I don't know how they live with themselves.
I completely agree, Richie. I can, and furthermore, I can't actually imagine how they'd explain to themselves the change that has occurred in their profession.
Yeah.
That once a news conference, was about trying to get the bottom, to make the power centres accountable, to question the politicians, to put them on the spot, to do interviews with them, to challenge them at press conferences, all of that. And that they basically gave that up. And I don't mean just that the editors gave it up, but that the message got right down to the last, corporal on the ground, the last private on the ground, in the trenches, that you don't ask any of these questions anymore. And it's very interesting what you said there about the question of that there's no balance. You see, there's a kind of an idea there, and because that thing translates also for other aspects. We've seen it in relation to the presidential election in the United States, Trump. Yeah. You're not required. The New York Times actually put out a message after Trump was elected that there was no longer any. This situation was so grave because there was a democratic election and a particular guy got elected. It was so grave that they needed to suspend all of the niceties of journalism. And I think that maybe has a relation to, because they did suspend them in relation to Trump. Even with Trump voted out, well, not voted out, but he's out of office now because he was cheated out of the election. But they're still going after him every day now, because they want to take away attention from the fact that the poor man that they've actually put in his place doesn't know what day it is, and that this is one of the greatest complete horror shows of all time. If we didn't have the biggest horror show of all going at the same time. But there's a kind of an idea there. There was a guy, go back, he was in the Frankfurt School, which is this is where the culture Marxist thing came out of. Herbert Marcuse was his name. And he came up with this idea called repressive tolerance, which is kind of an inversion. It's kind of like that. What it means essentially is that, he was saying, we have been too tolerant of our enemies, and we have to stop tolerating them, and we have to stop giving them the niceties of democracy and right to speak and all that.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you are intolerant of somebody who is themselves intolerant by our definition, that's okay. And that idea has infected journalism now, where journalists will actually say to you, literally, well, we know Trump is a Nazi. Right? What you say, but he's not. Oh, well, he is. And that's a journalistic statement. Just as, the circular statement that happened with the court in the Simon Dolan case, and indeed in ours, although we'll see the definitive position in the next few days. But this circular logic, the government was faced by a pandemic. Therefore, everything the government did was justified.
Afterwards, yeah.
How do you know? And then you ask one question, well, how do you know that it was a pandemic? Because the government said so.
Because they said so.
Now, get out of that one, that's it. That's the logic. And that's a judge. Talk about the doctors being thick. Like, that's a judge who studied in law school for many years and has been a barrister or whatever all his career, and has been elevated to the bench and is wearing silk and all the rest of it. And that's what he will tell you with a straight face.
The last line of defence, that judge, really, the last person, the last line of defence for the public to stop it. It's his duty to stop it and say, look, this is nonsense. It's illegal. It's wrong.
Right. But we saw the most extraordinary. We've seen now the most extraordinary performance. I'm tempting fate a bit here, Richie, because the good judge could be listening from the Court of Appeal here. But look, I don't care, because you see, like, we've seen this in the Dolan case, like, in the United Kingdom, and in the end, the Supreme Court in the United Kingdom refused to take the case, to hear the case. And the same thing has happened in America, with SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, that they refused to investigate the situation in Pennsylvania. Not once, but twice. They were offered it before. The case was put to them before the election, and said, oh, well, it's too late now, and then didn't do it. And then it's, well, this can be looked at after. Now, when it was after, oh, well, it's too late now.
Too
it's
late
moot,
now,
yeah. And what was very interesting about that, the first time they did that, there were 3 judges on the Supreme Court appointed by Donald Trump, all of them Catholics. Now get this, all of them Catholics, 3 of them, Cody Barrett, Gorsuch was the other guy, and Kavanaugh. And in 2 of those cases, I think in Kavanaugh and Cody Barrett, there was a massive unbelievable uproar and after the announcement of their nominations. And though you would think that these guys were going to be the most dangerous people to American liberalism that ever was, they're absolutely useless. Like they refuse to actually take a case in case it might look like in case they would actually have to make it look like they didn't think that Donald Trump was the worst thing ever in history, and he's the man that appoints them. So what we're actually seeing is that there's a level of, such a group hug among the establishment figures in all of these societies that no matter what is decided by one element of the establishment is supported by all the others. And again, you're back to what you just said. There has been no democracy. And I have to add that any of us who thought there was democracy, who wasted our breath talking about elections and talking about freedom of speech and all of that thing, we were absolutely codded up to our eyeballs. We were Egypt, Richie, and it's a sad thing to say that, but it actually is true.
I agree. It happened to me. I mean, for me, it was the Blair years. It was the Blair years that kind of gave it to me, really. I mean, I was in Ireland. I was at home at the time. I had spent a year and a half in the UK, but I was mostly at home, and I fell for Blair. I did hook, line, and sinker after years of conservative governments in this country, and obviously my own disillusionment with Ireland. I fell for it. I suppose in the early noughties, after September the 11th, I began to see that it didn't matter. And I'm not saying that you're wrong now. I have great respect for you. But on the Trump thing, I'm not saying that Trump wasn't cheated out of the election. I don't know whether he was or whether he wasn't. But I've seen so much manipulation over the years that before the election, John, and I do have the audio to prove it, before the election, I said that if I was the manipulators, if I was the hidden hand, I would throw the election to Biden and make it look like Trump was cheated for the chaos that would inevitably follow. Because order out of chaos has been these elites, their mantra for generations. It doesn't mean I'm right now. Yeah. It's just how I see it,
Oh, Richie, I have to say to you, I'm open for anything now, because what I've seen in the last year, I cannot say. Like, I remember actually once there was a slogan. I don't know where this slogan came from, but it was years ago, U2, when they were a good, decent band. But in the Zeropa tour of the early 90s, they did all these slogans, and there was this amazing stage show. But the big slogan, the main slogan was, "Everything you know is wrong."
That's right. That's right.
And that's I think we are where we are now, Richie. That we have been conned. There have been these people who have been the custodians of our societies and our democracies, and who all know each other and who let each other in on the basis that they are part of the team and on the message, have been actually manipulating us all the time. Now, this will sound terribly naive to people who know this for a long time, and I do apologise, but I have been idealistic about these things. I have been trusting of people. And I mean, I fell for the Blair thing as well. I mean, I thought Blair, he was like an idealistic man, a young man, full of energy. And I remember watching that. I was in England, over and back to England, because my daughter was born there at the time. It was a very exciting time, that time when you arrived in Downing Street and all that. But it was all staged. The whole thing was, they were actually Trotskyites. The whole lot of them were Trotskyists, who had it all planned, that they were going to revolutionise Britain and bring in mass immigration and do all kinds of bizarre things to destroy the very country that they were put in charge of.
He just carried on, didn't he? He just carried on Thatcher's policies. But he smiled and he was young. I thought he was Kennedy. To be honest, when he came in.
So did I. Yeah. And I wrote about him a lot and supported him beforehand. Like, I was onto him before, from the minute John Smith died. I kind of thought, this is Blair's opportunity, because I wasn't, the other fellow didn't really appeal to me, Brown, in the same way. But I mean, that's because I was a relatively young fellow myself, and but I met Blair once then, and I couldn't believe how absolutely nothing was there. There was nothing there. Like, I remember talking to him for half an hour, there was nothing there. He was all front.
Nothing behind the eyes, John.
No, nothing there. Nothing. Absolutely dead behind the eyes. That's right. And no sense of empathy, no sense of humour, no connection whatsoever. It was all about him. He was, I am Tony Blair, I am here. That was the vibe. You are now talking to Tony Blair. Please continue for a little while longer. That was the vibe you got. And really, I think we have to revisit the whole thing. We're talking about root and branch reform, but where do you start?
I don't know. Because the vast majority of people, we're speaking to a very big audience tonight. I don't say that to brag, it's true. The show's got a huge live audience, it's got a huge online presence, the podcast, iTunes and all of that. And yet I know that audience is scattered to the four corners of the earth. It's mostly in the UK and in Ireland and then in America. And after that, it's all over the world. But yet my own childhood friends, my own family, the ones that I get on with, I have a small family and I'm estranged from some of them, and that's because I'm a curmudgeonly old fecker and I fled the nest many, many years ago. But the vast majority think I'm a lunatic. It doesn't matter that I'm a fairly I'm a fairly together guy who's pretty genial most of the time. Doesn't matter. I'm absolutely nuts to be contemplating all of this. And I'm sure you have this now. An Irish broadsheet writer of renown, an author of renown, a broadcaster. John Waters on the Late Late Show. We all see John on the Late Late Show. But people now think you're mad. The vast majority.
They do, yeah.
Where we are.
They've been told by these kind of sleazebags, you see, and they believe it because they're told to believe it. And there's no... But I don't really care about that so much, Richie.
No, I know you don't.
I know what you're saying, but I this is a conundrum because I have a daughter and I have step grandchildren and I want to leave this country behind me in some kind of order that is fit to live in for young people to grow up in, and it isn't right now. It is absolutely not. And the people who have got hold of it are absolutely deeply dangerous people. And we need rid of them real fast. And we need to look at how they got in there and how we stop that happening again. And we need to go into every single one of our institutions and unpick them and rebuild them and make sure that people like that can never get hold of them again. These are big jobs. But the problem I have is the lack of adults, you see. This is why I say, there was about 25 years ago, Robert Bly, the American writer and poet, was a brilliant, brilliant writer. He wrote Iron John, a great book about men, but he wrote a book called The Sibling Society about 25 years ago, which I remember reading at the time, and it was really blew me away because the Sibling Society was that he was saying that we were on the verge of a society in which there would be no adults, that everybody would be a rival sibling of everybody else, and we'd be all involved in little squabbles, and there would be no vertical culture, that is culture handed down through the ages from our forefathers and foremothers, that we would all be talking about little things that happened yesterday and might happen tomorrow between ourselves, and that the culture would have would be a very thin band of culture, and that there would be no adults, that we would be all essentially children fighting. It would be, that book. What is that book again? The Golding, the Lord of the Flies. That was the image that used to come into my head when I read that, and I think we have that now, on Twitter and all these places. That while all the people are out there on Twitter and all these places squabbling like children, and these guys are taking over. And they have, as I said to you before, Richie, they've actually thought to themselves, God almighty, it's time to this old democracy crack. Sure, we're pretending this for the last 50 years about the democracy. But sure, we don't even need it now. They won't even care if we take it away altogether and throw it in the bin. And we can go right full Hitler and nobody will actually even blink an eyelid. And that's what's happened. You see, but again, I say the fundamental, I think that our profession, Richie, the profession of journalism, which is an ancient and honourable profession, is to blame here more than anything else, because none of this would have been possible had journalism not gone rogue.
20 minutes, it could be destroyed in 20 minutes. It really could, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, literally, if there was a people in the BBC and an RTE and the other stations, listening to this, for example. And I'm not saying we're not going to inspire anybody, but if they were inspired by some half sentence that one of us said and thought, they're right. What time is it? It's 7:15. By the 9 o'clock news, I want to put on a programme for half an hour that's going to expose this scam. By 10 o'clock tonight, Richie, it will be all over.
You're absolutely right. Panorama could do it. Dispatches on Channel 4 could do it. Could end it. I can't believe. So, I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you. It's a pleasure to speak to you because of who you are and because I've known you and known of you for years and years when I was working on radio in Ireland. So I love the fact that I'm speaking to you. At the same time, it's driving me around the effing bend because you and I both know that we're talking about a virus here that has a 99.8% survival rate. You have to be in your mid-80s to die from it, and you have to have comorbidities that have left you at death's door anyway, God love you. It doesn't touch the young. Most of us have had this thing already and not even known it. We know these things to be immutable truths. They're facts. And yet here we are. I mean, here we are.
Well, you see, that's an amazing process that you've actually said there, because say take that idea of the comorbidities. That's a very interesting one, because like for the last 11 months or 10 months, whatever, since April, we've been pointing out that the average age of death is 83. And that's not to say that it's, that it's not very sad when an 83-year-old person dies. Yeah. We're getting closer to it, so, I'm not taking that as something to be said lightly. But the point is that these people, that we've known that they had comorbidities and that you can't actually say almost in any case at all that COVID was the cause of death. And they have absolutely not alone rubbished it, but actually, attacked anybody who dare say that. Well, last week I saw the Minister for Health here in Ireland, Stephen Donnelly, actually talking. Somebody had said that, the people had died after getting the vaccine, and they were drawing a connection between the vaccine and the death. And he actually said, "Oh no," he says, those people had comorbidities.
Wow.
And that's reported by the press with a completely straight face. And nobody draws a comparison between the other situation that has been going on for 10 months. And that's the thing about it, that there's all these layers to the deception, and some of it is actually, and then you go back to the satanic thing. I don't know. It's a complicated thing from my point of view, the satanic thing, because I don't want to get into supernatural factors when there's enough evidence that is three-dimensional right in front of our eyes, But at the same time, I do know from people who tell me about satanic operations that there is a kind of as I understand it, now I'm open to contradiction on this, but that there is a kind of what you might call an ethics of Satanism. And among the ethics, it's almost like it is a religion and it does have its own rules. And one of the rules apparently is that if you're going to do something evil, let's say, now they don't say it like that, of course, but that you actually have to announce it. You have to tell people you're doing it. And this is how they're doing it, it seems to me. That you can see the signs of that syndrome all the time, where they're actually telling you in full view what's actually happening. But what's happened is they've set it all up that it has no impact on anything. That it's reported, in a certain way, to a certain extent, in a very low voice, on a very extreme, hidden way page, or whatever, and life goes on. So, they'll tell you, and I've seen this repeatedly in different jurisdictions in Ireland and Britain, where somebody will be up on a platform and they'll be explaining, and they'll almost go to this level, we're saying, if somebody dies of a heart attack, in another country, well, that wouldn't necessarily be put down as COVID, but here it is.
Yeah.
And if somebody falls off a roof and gets a brain hemorrhage and dies of that, he said, well, that wouldn't go down as a COVID road death in another country, but here it would, you see, because that's just the system we have here. And Paddy is looking at that and thinking, oh, yeah, no, you see, them doctors are fierce smart,
Yeah.
I would have thought that man now died of a split head, but you see, that just shows you the doctors, a bit of learning there, you know what I mean? It's the education, you see, that allows you to actually see the different layers and the levels to all this.
You are on to something there. Last September, Oxford University said, and they couldn't have been clearer about it. Oxford University came out and said last September, it was reported by the Telegraph and the Mail, but by nobody else, and there was no follow-up. They said, we've got a problem with these numbers. If somebody gets fails the COVID test in March and it comes back that they have COVID and they fall under a digger in July, they're put down as having died of COVID. What a brilliant thing you've hit upon there. This idea, the powers, the dark powers behind this whole scam. actually put it out there in the public domain. They don't hide it. It's out there for you. Yeah.
Well, this is the point, Richie. You see
Yeah.
that I think this is slightly complicated, but I think it's what you might call to do with what you might call the apprehension of information in a news-saturated society. We'll put it like that. That we might think as journalists that you go to great trouble putting together a report, say, and writing it down in the right order and the terse short sentences and all that, right, for the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
And you think that's what you're doing. But actually, that's not the way people are receiving, that they're literally taking that on board, those 4 or 5 sentences, and say, okay. Oh, yeah, no, I have that now. No, that's not what it is. It takes probably about 6 or 8 impressions of the same thing for people to get it, to get whatever it is. And if you don't have the 6 or 8, if you only have 3, it makes no impression at all.
Right.
That constant repetition is essential for propaganda. And if you just put something out once or twice, what happens is, I'll talk about myself, and if I didn't know about this, I'd say, well, I thought I heard something about, people being put down as COVID deaths when they weren't. I thought I heard something on the 6 o'clock news, but it wasn't on the 9 o'clock news, so it mustn't be true,
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, because there is some part of your brain that's confused. If it was on the 6 o'clock and it's not on the 9 o'clock, well, they must have found out that was wrong between around 7:30, and they changed it for the 9 o'clock or something like that. And so people actually can be told things and untold them at the same time. It's an amazing thing.
I'll never forget, John, last year. No, it wasn't last year. It was 2 years ago. I was, as part of this program, I interview guests, but there's a 25-minute monologue at the beginning of every program, and I use clips from UK and Irish news to emphasise certain points I'd like to make. I'll never forget a couple of years ago, Kay Burley interviewed a doctor on Sky News Breakfast, and it was about the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine campaign was beginning, so it was in the early autumn. They want everybody to take the vaccine. And they bring this woman on, and she's very articulate, but she basically says that, well, not everybody needs to get the flu vaccine, and the flu doesn't affect so many people. Younger people don't need to worry about it, and stuff like that, and all of that. Anyway, Sky was obviously aghast, because ordinary practice would be for Sky would be that on every subsequent news hour, they would use a clip of that woman that they just interviewed live in studio. That's how it goes. You know this. They would take 30 seconds. But no, the woman wasn't on message. So next hour up, Kay Burley had a completely different doctor on, and that doctor said everybody has to get the flu vaccine. I'm telling you, everybody. Flu is getting worse every year, and you can pass it on, and it can kill somebody close to you, and kids can give it to their grannies and kill them. I've never seen a more egregious example of what you've just described there. It was world class, Yeah.
Well, another good example is for the last few months and months now, we've been hearing about testing, and from April on in all our countries, it was all until about May or June. It was all about deaths, fatalities, right, from COVID, and that's another story which we could go into another day. But but then it stopped being. Then the deaths kind of tailed off, and then it suddenly became cases.
Yeah.
And what they weren't telling you at all, or what they weren't emphasizing, was that the number of cases you have entirely depends on the number of tests you have, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that the PCR test that they were using was known to be deeply suspect and not fit for purpose, and that the guy who had actually invented it said it wasn't at all fit for purpose in this regard. That's not what it was for, right? And then, so we knew that, and yet it is like the people reporting or the politicians. Well, look, forget that now. Put that out of your head, because that's not true. Because we're telling you now that the cases are the thing now, and they would tell us more and more cases, and they just kept telling us the numbers of cases, and they did everything then in accordance with the number of cases.
Yeah.
They brought in face masks on the number of cases. They brought in all kinds of regulations about restaurants and whatnot, and they've had more lockdowns on the basis of cases, all entirely in the late summer, early autumn, and yet every other day you would hear something. Oh no, that PCR test, or they know that that's false. That doesn't work at all. But still, they would go on about the cases. I've never seen this before, Richie.
No, me neither.
This is a kind of a new dimension of journalism that is not any longer journalism. It's basically corruption.
Propaganda, isn't it? It's the BBC is the propaganda wing of this agenda. And what you said about cases, they have convinced, I think, great numbers of the population, they've convinced them that cases equals sickness, which is
Yeah.
nonsense. But they've
No, it's
convinced.
nonsense. Because most of those what they're calling cases are simply on the PCR test, and there's no symptoms
No
whatsoever.
symptoms, yeah.
And there's a huge number of false positives, and there's all kinds of things. And when you actually wash it all down to, you find there's only a handful of people who actually have any symptoms, and we don't even know what they have. It could be any kind of flu, it could be any kind of coronavirus, it could be anything. And what they seem to be doing, or have seemed to be doing for a long time, is just simply harvesting naturalistic, normal sickness from wherever they might be able to find it and calling that COVID. And when somebody dies and they've had a sneeze in the last 3 weeks, that's COVID too.
And they might have fallen off a ladder, like you said. We've got about 45 seconds left. Before you have a quick final word, obviously the very best of everything, yourself and Gemma next Tuesday. And it does mean a great deal to me. I'm living here, obviously, in Salford, but it means a great deal to me that despite the flack and the ridicule and the abuse, is that you still do it, that you get up there and you present some opposition to it. You should be eternally proud of that, whatever happens, John. I really mean that. And I mean it, buddy. And I know you'll come back again whenever you feel like coming back. So I'll give you the final word. 45 seconds today. You have been listening to John Waters, folks. John mentioned Give Me Back the Bad Roads earlier on. I was given a present of that by Jean Ann Crowley. It's a fantastic read, and it's prescient today. I'm telling you, it is. Yeah. Final word, buddy.
Yeah, well, I just thought to say something that I'm doing an article, series of articles in the next week on my site Substack, John Waters Unchained, which is about a man who died. I only found this out. I've talked about this man umpteen times, possibly to you, Richard. A man called Mike Cooley.
Yeah.
Who was kind of an industrial philosopher. And I'm only after finding out in the last week. He came from Tuam, County Galway. He was a brilliant, brilliant man. I interviewed him many times years ago when I started off in the Irish Times first. But he was talking about the dangers of technology and all of that, and the kind of technology that we were adopting. And everything he said is now coming true in this great reset that they call the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where essentially the human race is going to be deprived of a function and a purpose, not to mention a place in the world or a thing to be doing with your life and your identity and so on. And we haven't, to talk about the media, they have refused to allow us any capacity to understand this and to discuss it. So in tribute to Mike, I'm doing a series of 3 or 4, I'm not sure, articles about this. And in tribute to him, in the next few weeks, I'm on John Waters Unchained, starting tomorrow. But I think this is such a vital thing, because ultimately, I am convinced that all of this has been a scam to bring in this thing. And essentially what it's about is plundering the creativity of the working people of the world. You're back to Marx fundamentally. You're back to the very core of Marxism, which, what I say to people, no matter how much, people might, eschew or obviously want to avoid communism and socialism and all that, Marx was not wrong about everything, he had a very clear understanding of what work was and the function of work in human existence, and that that while we get our satisfaction and our joy out of life, that there was a fundamental necessity to be engaging with the world in that way. And we're going to lose that overnight thanks to the misdirection of this whole COVID thing.
Because you want to get into that, John?
They will have taken everything from under our feet.
Next time you're on, let's focus exclusively on the Great Reset and what you see it as and where it's going.
Yes,
we'll move away from talking about the figures and the deaths and all of that.
Yes.
I will, obviously, on Facebook and on Twitter and everywhere else, I'll put those articles on there when they're out. I'll look for it tomorrow, the first one, and I'll give it as much promotion as I
can. I think it's going up tonight, actually, Richie. I think it'll be up about 8 o'clock tonight. So it's called, essentially, it's about the destructiveness of technology, the despotic machine, I think I'm calling it, or something like that. And I think that this is something we urgently need to pay attention to. We cannot forget this, Richie, that only for people like you are doing great work, but the mainstream media that is really hogging the eyeballs of the vast majority of the population is actually misleading those people at in an enormous way, and taking from them the very things that would make their lives worthwhile. It is unforgivable. I am deeply shamed to say that I ever called myself a journalist now. It is a profoundly shameful profession, and only those who have left it and have carried on that function of fourth estate outside can call themselves that anymore. I call the others journaliers.
Journaliers. Thanks for your time again today, John. Really appreciate it, mate.
Thank you
no
very
idea.
much.
Thanks a lot, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. And all the best on Tuesday. John Walters, live on the Richie Allen Radio Show this Thursday. That's it for the week, by the way. Thanks for being with me all week long. I'll be with you again on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. That's UK time for Sunday morning melodies. 10 o'clock for the old melody programme. Thanks to Tony Gosling in the first hour. Brilliant guy. Thisweek.org.uk, the politics show. Tomorrow you'll find out all about it there. Thisweek.org.uk. And John Waters you've been listening to. John Waters Unchanged. Check that out online as well. Those articles going up. The first one going up in about an hour's time. Have a fantastic weekend. Until Sunday, it's bye from the BBG. Bye now.